All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN for Bryan Hayes, Frankie Corrado, Jamie Noodles McLennan.
What's going on?
What's happening? How are we feeling this afternoon?
All good, boys. How was the panel last night? Did Duthie stay out of your way? Did he give you free reign to do whatever you want? We were doing the show yesterday, so we couldn't watch it. We don't know what happened. We saw the cold open. It was great. But we were talking. We're like, it would be great if those guys showed up and they just told, Duthie and Billy, stay out of our way, have some viz ready, and we're just going to let it fly for 30 minutes.
Well,
pretty much what happened, I would
think
say.
so.
I mean, the captain,
I think that's kind of
he was enjoying himself there in the corner. I'll tell you, that was Bobby Mack's spot, and there was shades of Bobby Mack. With the one shot you just went on, you radioed yourself, because TV, it's like you're allowed 15 to 25 seconds at TV. He went 90 seconds, like Duthie staring him down. Hayes was on fire last night. I was proud. I was proud.
The thing that people wouldn't know is if the camera is just on Hayes, Duthie's in the back. He's trying to get people's attention. He's like, coming back to me. Like, guys, it's coming back to me. And Hayes would just be, like, pushing him off. Like, I'm still going here. I got stuff to say.
Well, and you're referencing the SportsCenter hit that we did to start the night, which was that was the starter that I went long. And I think what happened there was a classic example of worlds colliding because – listen, those guys, they're the best in the business. Like James Duthie and Mike Lane and Billy Dotson, the whole crew, everyone behind the scenes, on the floor, everyone helping out. And it's their world. That's the world they live in. Like in Noodles, Frankie, you guys have done a lot of panels over the years. You know what it's like. I've done a few now. I'm familiar with it, but it's kind of a new world to me. But at the same time, when we're on it, it is understood that it's the panel first. Obviously, we have a reason to be there. The Leafs are playing tonight, but it's an OverDrive mashup, and the boys are going to be there. So I think they loosen up a little bit in terms of allowing for a little bit more freewheeling, so to speak. And I think what happened there on that SportsCenter hit was I thought we had kind of pre-planned a couple of things we were going to hit, and Duthie threw something else at me off the bat, which was fine, and I can react to it on the fly, but I gave that a little bit more time than it was necessary for the reaction, and then I just said right through the yellow light, and I started getting to the point I said I was going to get to, and that led to like a 90-second answer, and that's how the night got started with the SportsCenter hit. Basically, me chewing up time that Owen Noodles were supposed to get.
I love it.
So,
get your money's worth. That's
a retrospective
you know what
apology on that one. But outside of that, it was a blast. We had a great time last night.
We had a blast.
Awesome.
And you know what, though? I felt it when you get a unique situation like that, regardless of what the game was like, I felt like we were kind of charged up to bring some material anyways. And we were tested. You get a dud in that first. Like, what was the shot? 16 to 1?
15-1. 15-1.
And we're still like, okay, hey, glass half empty, glass half full. Like, hey, they got a chance to win this game. And sure enough, like that was basically, I mean, it was Keith Bauer's stunt double, and it was Auston Matthews. That's what it was.
That's right. It was Anthony Stolarz had himself a Vezina game last night.
He did.
He has. Listen, I think it's Hellebuck and Gustafsson who are clearly 1-2 in the league. Noodles, Frankie, you can argue that if you want.
In there.
I can't imagine you would, but maybe you would. But I think at this point it's Gustafsson for sure. It was Hellebuck earlier in the year. It felt like a lock 15 games in. When they were 15-1, it was like just give them the award. I think it's actually evened out a little bit because prior to last night, Winnipeg had kind of hit a bit of a wall. But I think Stolarz, when you look at his stats and you look at his numbers and you look at a game like last night where the Leafs – that was a controlled scrimmage in the first period, run by Sheldon Keefe, right? Like
it was. Both teams were looking at Sheldon Keefe going, okay, you're going to run the drill here because there was familiarity to it. But you're right. That's a great term for it, controlled scrimmage. That's what
it looked like. That was what it was in the first last night, and yet it was 0-0 because of Stolarz. Like, the Leafs had nothing, absolutely nothing. It wasn't like they were missing the net or – whatever, that came eventually in the second period when Matthews had all those breakaways and 2-on-1s and he couldn't close. But Stolarz was phenomenal last night. He was great in the second period as well. And even in overtime, didn't get tested a ton, but had to be there when he had to be there. And that's what it was. That was the Stolarz game last night in basically his hometown.
And
just an incredible night for him.
Isn't it crazy that, Sheldon Keefe is on the other side with New Jersey, and how many times when he was the coach of the Leafs did we see that script where the Leafs outshot, outplayed, outperformed, and then they got goalied by the Vemelkas of the world? And, Stolarz is having a great year. He's not, a super well-established starter at this point in the NHL, although he's working his way towards it this year. But the Leafs were on the other end of that, where their goalie makes the saves, keeps them in it, buys them enough time that eventually they get, the garbage type depth goal that they desperately needed by Holmberg, who desperately needed a goal. And then it gives Matthews a little time to get that one extra chance because he had missed 3 grade A chances at that point in the game already. All that just buys you time to find a way to win the game. And ultimately that's what the Leafs did. And I don't think there's been a lot of time bought by their goaltenders in the last few years for them to do that type of stuff.
No, nothing to that extent, or even really the extent that both goalies have supplied all year. You look at it now, Stolarz has started 16 games. He's 9-5-2, and he has a .928 save percentage. And all the underlying numbers, expected saves, expected goal, all that's it's just elite.
Couldn't have asked for more.
Elite across the board. More. And even when you get to Joseph Woll is 7-3. He's got a .919 save percentage. And neither of them have been pulled. Neither of them have been a gas can. 3 goals on 5 shots. You said it while we were watching the game last night, Noodles. He was getting snowed in 2 or 3 minutes into the game, off draws, set plays. It's here we go. He faced 4 or 5 shots almost immediately, and he looked so comfortable, and then he was in it. Then he had a bit of a sweat on. It's this guy's here to play tonight. You couldn't predict he would do what he would do 3 or 4 minutes in, but you could tell he was prepared to play, and he was great last night. He was phenomenal.
That's where I went. We were talking before the game, and I brought that stat up. I was nobody's been pulled. Nobody's really had an off night a week. And, the Florida game, Stolarz called himself out. I think he just wanted it. He'd gotten his Stanley Cup ring. He just wanted it. But he wasn't red rotten. The team didn't play well in Florida. Florida's allowed to play well some nights, too. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say that was a terrible performance. But if you look at it, I said to Hayes and I said, we haven't seen a goalie pull. We haven't seen anything like that. And that game kind of it smelled like something New Jersey was coming off being shut out. They were a little pissed. And I said to Hayes about 4 saves in, about 3-4 minutes into the game, I said, he's going to be fine. But if he was off, that's 3-0 before the 5-minute mark. Over. And the game's over.
Yeah.
But he was brilliant. And coming back to, you made the comment earlier, Brian, about putting yourself in the Vezina conversation. I think he's going to get to the amount of games where he will be in that conversation for sure, because it was Allmark that had 49, I think, that won it. Even if it's something with a 4 in it, if it's in the high 4s, you can be considered. And to me, yes, he has to be, if you do a top 3 to 5, absolutely he's 100% in. I don't know. I'm not voting today. But yes, Hellebuck has to be in there for his body of work at the starting of the season. And now, they hit the ditch recently, but they put up an 8 spot last night on Boston.
They'll be fine.
That was wild last night there.
Yeah. But the thing is I think Hellebuck's there. I think Gustafson's there. And then at 3, Stolarz, there's other guys, but why not? That's my point is his name. He's had such an amazing start. And people were mad at me last week when I was just leave the sunglasses alone and stop pucks. There was an old man yelling at the clouds. Yes, but I told you off air, Brian, I'm so passionate towards Stolarz because I think it's an amazing story, and I just want him to play so well. And last night, I think that was his best game as a Leaf. It was unbelievable, and it reminded me of Game 1 where Montembeault stole that game against the Montreal Canadiens. That was Stolarz last night. That's how good. I thought New Jersey played fantastic.
Yeah.
Sheldon Keefe can say, you know what, guys, you play like that 95 out of 100 times, you're going to win that game. Doesn't matter. They got goalie. Stolarz stole the game.
He did. And the amazing thing is when you look at the details of the game, that even with that being the case, Matthews could have had 4 goals last night.
You could have.
Like, he at least could have won 4-1 in reg, because we were breaking down the tape in the second period, the third period. Marner almost hit him the first time on a 2-on-1, and it got broken up. Then it's 2-on-1, misses the net. Nyes hits him. He tries to go 5-hole. Then he was in alone a couple other times later in the game. Like, in alone, like wide open breakaways, and he didn't score. And then finally he gets it in overtime. And we're watching it. If you're watching on TSN 4.
That's 4 there, Brian. That's 4. This is 5.
Yes.
This
the
is
fifth
5.
one finally went in. Like, legitimately, he could have. You're not going to score on every single one, but 2 or 3. And if he didn't score in that overtime one, he would have got off the ice afterwards and just been like, what is wrong with me?
That's a shattered stick as soon as you get into the dressing room.
Yeah.
Like, that's how frustrating that night would have been. And I know, like, Matthews is coming off the injury, and we've been talking, like, how healthy is he? Like, when is he going to really start to, pick up the pace goal-scoring wise? I wasn't overly worried watching that last night, because how many times was he able to create enough separation where he gets the grade A chance? Like, if he wasn't able to do that, like if there's always a stick in the way or there's a body in front of you and you're like, man, like Matthews is just not getting the looks, then I would be more concerned that way. And it's not about like getting chances. Like, I think that's the old saying, like, hey, I'm not concerned because I'm getting chances. No, like, he created enough separation with his body that they were clean looks last night that at some point he was going to finish. And his shooting percentage is so low this year. Like, we were talking about it yesterday. He's like he's a 10% shooter. He's regularly a 16% shooter, and last year he was at 18%. So like, at some point that is going to even out. And I watched that last night and I say, okay, that is going to even out because he's getting the separation and he's getting the clean looks at the net. If he wasn't getting that, I wouldn't feel as optimistic about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because there's different layers of goal scoring, right? Like a 20-goal scorer, his chances are rebounds around the net or, tip-ins or something like that. If he's not getting those, you're like, all right, he's in trouble. Once he gets those and they don't go in, you feel like, all right, he'll get one soon. He'll get up to his number, 20 goals, 25. When you're a guy who's capable of scoring at the level he is, you got to have those. You got to have the power play looks, but you also have to have what you just said. You got to be able to separate and create on your own. Like, when you're the best goal scorer, you create goal scoring on your own. And I'm not sure he was capable of doing that earlier in the year. And last night he did it, and specifically just using his body, using his pace through the neutral zone. Like, in overtime, Pesci's trying, and Pesci's not a small guy. He's trying to get him. He can't keep up with him. And credit to Matthews for just continuing to go to the well. And they stole 2 points, but you're allowed to do that. And, the beauty of a tandem is that when they're both healthy and they're both playing well, you're just going to get that a number of times over the course of the year. Not as extreme. Like, you're playing with fire, obviously. If it's as extreme as it is last night, that's just simply going to happen once or twice a year maybe. But you can have your B game, and if the goalie's playing well, you're probably going to win. You're going to be in a position to win a lot, and you're just not going to get blown out. And I think that's what sticks out with this goaltending this year, Noodles, is, of course, you're going to lose games. You're going to have games where the goalie isn't the greatest or your bounces aren't breaking your way. But they've been so consistent. Very rarely, if at all, have we been in a situation in the second period or going into the third where you're like, they have no chance. It's over. The goalies pretty consistently always keep them in the game or put them in a position where they feel like they can win it halfway through the game or going into a third period.
That's all you can ask for, is your goaltender to give you an opportunity every night. Now, the interesting part is, if you start looking into the underlying numbers and that. Now, Anthony Stolarz has one stolen game coming into last night's game. Joseph Woll doesn't have one. Doesn't mean they haven't played well. It means that that's the Montembeault night, opening night, like where it's like that's a goalie. Last night was a complete stolen game. So now Stolarz has 2. And that's on par, because you're looking at 1 every 10, 1 every 12. Your goaltender has to stand on his head because another team, and we've seen it. Lucas Dostal almost did it. What was it, a couple years ago, and then the Sun took a shot at him, saying this nobody or whatever, like whatever it was. But like it's rare that a goaltender steals a game or has to. But it's impressive watching that when it's the team that you're watching and going, okay, it's our guy, because usually we're going, it's the other guy that's had to do it or whatever.
Especially if you're a good team. right? Like
Right.
the Leafs are a good team, so you shouldn't have to rely on your goalie to steal you as much. Where
Right.
if you're Anaheim, you will. You know, if you're
Right.
Montreal with Montembeault, you're going to have to because you're
Yeah.
you're probably going to be on the wrong side of the depth chart.
You're looking for quality starts. Like that's
the
if,
word,
if you're
yeah.
getting quality starts, I think that's the stat that's the most relevant and the one that you can hit on if you're a good goalie, the most consistent. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys felt, but like listening to Sheldon after the game say that's the best goaltending in the league right there. Hey, that could be true as a team. But your guy Markstrom is really good too. I just kind of wonder like how he would have perceived that.
Okay, let's
that
play
is
that.
said.
Let's play Sheldon after the game, and we can try to get a read on if he's being sarcastic, if it's a matter of fact. Here's Sheldon Keefe postgame on the Leaf goaltending.
Coach, you mentioned this felt like one of the better efforts of the season. What do you think prevented your team from being able to bury more pucks?
Best goaltending in the league on the other side.
Okay, wow.
I don't think he was being sarcastic. I think he was just saying like that. You know what? Like if you look at it statistically, they're right up there. Like it's, you know, he's happy with his. We had him on 2 days ago.
He should
He's
be happy.
with
He's
his
got
goaltending.
Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen. He's got two goalies. They give him a chance, even and then
listen,
some.
And there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. Brian, did you take that as sarcastic?
No, I think he's being. It's a matter of fact. Again, that was I believe a New Jersey reporter. Like it may have been I may have read it differently if it was a Toronto reporter doing something. And he's best in the world. You know, sometimes you got that with sarcastic coaches in the
Right.
past and. Guys would come on. I remember John Cooper would do that sometime. Oh, they're
That's
just
a
too good
Daryl
over
Sutter
there.
too.
Or
Hey,
Daryl
remember
Sutter. That's a
those
Daryl
playoff
Sutter.
runs?
Yeah,
He
Big
would
D,
do
Best
that.
of all time over there. I don't know. What do you want out of
Who
us?
did he say that about? Remember, Big D was like greatest player I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I
who
can't
was
remember
that?
the goalie. He was like, I can't believe we even scored on him. That was in the playoffs. We got to find that quote or whatever.
Yes.
Steve Joe from the
Or
bridge.
The
'Cause it was-
other one. Coach, what'd you think of your third line today? Or Coach, what'd you think of your fourth line today? Which line is that?
Yeah,
Right, deadpan.
the
I don't have a
recorder,
fourth
yeah.
line. They're all number ones, or they're all number fours.
That was against Detroit. I remember that because he was trying to get the reporter to say, okay, who's the third line? And Steve Yzerman was on the third line. He's like, that's not a third line with that guy's on the, basically like Daryl was being, facetious with that. But I didn't take Sheldon's comments like, listen, he just watched his team just got goalied. You're going to say, and statistically they're right there. So it's like that's not a false statement.
No, I think. I mean, do we think that Stolarz again is better than Hellebuck, better than the best Vasilevsky and Shesterkin?
I don't.
No, I don't think Sheldon does either. So it doesn't. We don't have to parse words and break down everything.
Right.
But I do. I think what you're driving at, Frankie, is it doesn't matter what the Leafs feel about it or anyone in Toronto feels about it. It's how the room would feel about it. And that comment reminds me of last year when Colorado rolled through town. I remember what he said about McKinnon and McCarr, and he talked them up as if those are the best players in the world. He might have used that quote. And they're unstoppable, basically. And when they get going, it's like there's nothing we can do because they're so good. Slightly different context. But
Right.
I guess if you're Markstrom, I don't know. I mean, he's been good for them. He's been very good for them this year.
Yeah.
But I think you also have to be reasonable as a pro. I mean, Markstrom, I don't think would put his hand up and say I'm the best goalie in the world either.
No,
He's
no,
not.
he would. He's
just-
a very good goalie. I also wonder if part of it, from his point of view, is like how long was he here? 5 years? Like for 5. It just he never had Stolarz when he was in Toronto. Like he never had that kind of goalie while he was here. He always had here's Jack Campbell, he's playing pretty good, and all of a sudden he's not. Here's Ilya Samsonov, he's playing pretty good, now he's hurt and he's not. Like go through the list of the guys that he had. He never had
Right.
that when he was here, and all of a
But
sudden he leaves and here it is.
But he had pockets of that. Like, we can't forget that Freddie Anderson made the All-Star team. Jack Campbell made the All-Star team. Like, there was Ilya Samsonov, I think, went 2 months without a loss, right? On home ice. Like, it was, like, they had good teams and they had stable goaltending. I think what happened is, and what you're probably getting at, Frankie, is it's more, when push came to shove, the trust factor wasn't there. Whether
Right.
it was down the stretch or into the playoffs, or the guys weren't healthy to handle that. Like I think there's a difference in, you said, well, is Stolarz Vasilevsky, is Stolarz Hellebuck? You could also say, I don't think he is, but it doesn't mean he's not playing like them or playing like them this
Absolutely
year or having. So there's a difference.
He is.
So I wanted to back up my comments. That's not a shot.
No,
Just because somebody is maybe doesn't have the talent of other guys. Anthony Stolarz is having an unbelievable season, and he has to be in the same breath as guys who are top tier because he's playing like it. So he deserves all the flowers in that direction. I wanted to back up my comment because it's not a shot as to he's not Hellebuck. Well, he hasn't won business. He hasn't
but
done
it's
that.
factual. Exactly.
Exactly.
There's other goal scorers that have more goals than Matthews. It doesn't mean they're better at goal scoring. I mean, obviously, we know what everyone means by that. It's just a fact. Like Stolarz has been a backup his whole career. He's still in a tandem here. He's been phenomenal though, and I do think Keefe was handing him out a genuine compliment because he deserves it. And, he saved the players. He allowed Matthews to have a big moment, which he needed, and historically he's been great against New Jersey. We saw that stat last night. He's now scored 19 goals in 20 games against the Devils in his career. He scores against them at a higher clip than any other team in the league, which is saying something. But Stolarz saved them from losing 3 in a row. And then looking back and digging even deeper, because even when you look before that against the Preds, it wasn't a great game. They came alive in the third and took it. Against Chicago, the game before that, kind of flat, but they're just so much better, and Chicago stinks, so they said, we'll take the 2 points. If that is 3-0 last night and Stolarz is hung out to dry in his hometown, it's such a different mood, and it's such a different reaction. But that's also the benefit of the goalie, and this is where you look ahead to the rest of the week here, and the players – and the depth on this team, and we'll see if McCabe returns because I think that's a big part of it. They miss Jake McCabe greatly and his consistency all throughout the lineup. But you got Anaheim tomorrow night. They're playing tonight in Ottawa. So back-to-back, you're at home against Anaheim. You're going to be a massive favorite. And then you got Detroit and Buffalo this weekend, 2 teams that are really struggling. If you play the way you played last night, you're going to lose probably 2 of the 3. You'll probably get 1 just because of who you are and who they are. But it's time, like last night, hopefully for the Leafs, and I'm sure Berube is preaching this, wake-up call, you had a little dip, it's all good, it happens, every team's going to go through it. Get going here the next few games because you can really bank a lot of points and feel good going into a Christmas break.
Yeah, it's an opportunity.
You're right. Yeah, you're right there. I mean, you're right there with Florida atop the division, and Boston and Tampa have had their ups and downs. And
it's a good opportunity for Berube too, though, to kind of keep his foot on the gas, right? I think sometimes teams when they win and they get away with it, it can be like, yeah, we'll sort it out. Don't worry, we're getting the points. You don't really reflect on it when you don't lose because it has the winning feeling after the game. You show up to the rink the next day. It's kind of business as usual. If he can find a way to make it not so business as usual, and you're still stacking the wins, that's a nice little happy medium there where guys aren't, not to say that they're not miserable going to the rink because you wouldn't be miserable on a team this good, but just keeping the foot down and while still collecting the wins, that's a pretty exclusive little spot to be in the NHL. Not everyone gets to do that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a part of the schedule where, like you say, you look at quality of competition moving forward. It's an opportunity for you. Listen, Anaheim's not just going to roll over, but you do have an opportunity on a back-to-back situation and to catch them. Again, going into, Buffalo, going against the, Detroit. That type of stuff.
You can bury those teams.
Yeah,
really.
You're going to have to battle the palm trees in Buffalo, though. You'll have to,
they got
work
New
through
York
that.
coming up. How happy this is a classic example of who wants to be playing tonight, where the Sabres and Rangers are probably ecstatic they're out of New York, but they're not out of the state. So they're going to have to deal. Ranger fans are going to show up tonight. There'll be a ton of Ranger fans in the building. I believe the game is in Buffalo. And then you got the Sabres and Kevin Adams, and we don't have palm trees, and we got bad taxes, and that comment hanging over them. And whenever they get a lead, it's inevitable the Sabres are going to blow it.
My God, that's the thing.
It's
They
crazy.
could score. Like, I was watching that game the other night. It was 5-3. I turned around, and it's 5-5. And I think UPL's starting tonight. It was James Reimer the other night. Like, I don't know if people were like James
Reimer's still in the league. I don't think the average Leaf fan would have a clue.
He was with Anaheim this year. He started in Buffalo. He got picked up off waivers, and then Buffalo took him back. That was, Noodles, that was such a bizarre scene, Buffalo against Detroit. Detroit didn't want to start the kid, Kosa, who's like a big part of their future, right?
Yeah.
They start Husso. He gets pulled. And you think, okay, this is Buffalo. Like, you got to take advantage of this. Like, this is pedal to the metal. Kid playing his first game. He's coming in cold, and they only got 14 shots through 2 periods, and the kid wins, and Detroit wins. Like, if you can't win that one, I don't know, man. There's all kinds of problems there.
Ugly scene.
Yeah.
But the thing is they're right. Like, the weird part is when those two teams play, somebody's getting – that was a 3-point game. Like, they're getting points. Like, that's the weird thing is like that Atlantic, I said from day one, I think it's going to be more bunched up. Now, you could separate yourself at the top, but it's going to continue to be bunched up because nobody's separating yourselves in that bottom, call it 4 or 5. Like, that's where there's points every night, and they're going to continue to get them. There's the standings there. Like, it's
I mean, Ottawa, again, you got Anaheim here tonight. Ottawa's it's a mandatory win. Like,
they have to win, but all of a sudden they're 2 points behind Tampa.
Yeah.
And, like that. Now, Tampa's got a few games in hand. That is the one thing is Tampa's now out west. I think they play in Calgary and Vancouver.
Yeah,
no, they just did Vancouver. They did Edmonton.
They were in Edmonton last night.
Yeah. So, but that's, these teams are playing against each other, and there's points to be had there. Like, the separator isn't as big in those, we'll call it the bottom 5.
As long as they keep up. Like, it's still earlier in the year where it can be deceptive. You add another 20 games, and those 4 points become 8 points. That it's got to flip the other way. Florida and Toronto are in one place. I do think Boston's still vulnerable. I think Tampa could be. And Ottawa can get them. Like, Buffalo's in a weird place. But Ottawa, they can get them. They got to run off. They got to get wins like tonight.
They got to go on a straight.
They're going on the road.
Is a mandatory win.
Yeah, you got to
get
get
the
win tonight.
You got to win tonight, not only because you're playing Anaheim, Noodles. Then Ottawa's got to go to Carolina, which they never win there. And they're on the road for a long time. Like, it's going to be a grind for them.
Junior.
Yeah.
It's because of the World Junior.
Right.
They got
the
9 in a row. That's why they got to make hay at home. But the biggest challenge, too, is, on the road, like, they do Carolina, and then it's out west, right? Like, Senators at Canucks. It's in Seattle. It's Calgary. It's Edmonton. Like, it's
a circus. It's a circus of a trip that they're on.
But you have to win games. That's the bottom line is you've got an opportunity. I think Tampa's a really good team. I just think they got to catch up in games. But, that game last night against Edmonton, I was watching that. Like, that was pretty good.
It was a close game. Yeah, it was low scoring, close game. And all right, Jimmy Ralph coming up. Ralphie will join us on Stolarz, on Wall, and what he saw of Matthews last night. The Pacioretty hit on Hughes at the end of the second period.
Oh, we got to get into that.
We will get into that, and the reaction or lack thereof from the New Jersey Devils. Yeah. Top 50 Dougie just right in there having a conversation.
How about Hey, don't do that.
Don't do that. Did you vote for me?
Excuse me, sir. Don't do that. I was like, oh, are you kidding me?
That
should have been a cross-checking penalty.
And even the knives hit from behind. That was a bad hit. That was a really bad hit, and no one did anything. Ralphie coming up, and we've got role play level of concern in about an hour. More on what's going on down at the winter meetings. Those are wrapping up. There's a lot happening in baseball, a lot happening in the AL East. We'll tell you about that as well. Some updates on Scotty Barnes, and we're pushing towards the Thursday nighter tonight, tomorrow. Niners-Rams. What a game that's going to be. NFC West still up for grabs. So we'll get to that as well. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Overdrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. I'm Scott Hartnell. Later this afternoon, role play level of concern. Tim Kirkjian will join us as well on what the Jays are doing. What's going on in the AL East. There's a lot of breaking news today, so we'll get into the baseball world a little bit later on. And the Leafs will be back in action tomorrow night with the Ducks in town. You'll hear that game right here on TSN 1050, which means Joe Bowen will have the call alongside our next guest. Here's Jim Ralph. How you doing, Ralphie?
Good, Hazy. How you guys doing?
We're doing very well. What did you make of Stolarz last night? I mean, what can you put that into perspective for us, how much he helped his teammates playing the way he played?
Yeah, I think they've got to create a different column for wings. which should be like didn't really deserve it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're going to get those over the year where you play the opposition and it doesn't go your way. But I think, and hopefully Noodles would agree with this, it was a tough game. I mean, there were a lot of scrambles and a lot of traffic, and even the sequence that led up to the Holmberg shorthanded goal. There were 5 or 6 whacks at it and scrambles in front of the net before they got through. So it was, to me, it was one of those games that it was a battle. It was an absolute battle that, he shone for them and was the number one reason easily that they won that game.
Well, that's where I was going to go, Ralphie. We see it all the time. We saw it game 1 of the season for the Leafs where Montembeault was the guy that did that at the other end. But is there something, I mean, you've watched these goalie tandems for years now for the Leafs, and I was trying to defend a little bit in previous years where you had Jack Campbell made the All-Star team. Samsonov had some stretches. Freddie Anderson had some stretches. What would be the separator for this tandem that is a little bit different from years past that we've seen?
Well, I mean, I think the odd thing is I think Stolarz, the most he's ever played in the season is 27 games, and Wall only got into 25 last year. So the odd part about this duo is they've never done it before, on their own or with anybody else, an extended period. And it'll be interesting to see, especially with the heavy schedule they've got the rest of the month, if they can keep it up. But it just seems like, if you want to compare it to Allmark and Swayman and, the runs they've had together when they were in Boston, that's probably the only comparable I can think of, other than maybe, let's throw Glenn Healy in with Curtis Joseph as a comparable to what we're seeing now for our buddy Hills.
Of all the things that make you feel comfortable with Stolarz specifically, like how high up on the list would be just his sheer size? Like looking at a goaltender that's that big in the net, I feel like that's something, the Leafs haven't had. If you go back through the Samsonov, Wall's not as big, Campbell was smaller. Like you go back to Freddie Anderson, that's the last like real big kind of hulking goalie in the net. How high up on the list of things you like is his size?
Well, I think it's almost a contradiction, Frankie, because he's got the size, but the agility as well. And, usually you get a lot of guys that are big goalies that are great positionally, take up a lot of the net, play their angles well, but his agility for a big man, I think, is what stands out. And, like when you only see a guy once or twice a season, if that, you don't get an appreciation of a player unless you watch him game in and game out in every minute that he plays. And that's what amazes me, is that he's not a blocker. He's very active, he's very agile, but at the same time under control. So, the size you almost don't notice as much as the agility we've seen from him.
With Jim Ralphie and Joe Bowen with the call tomorrow night, Leafs Ducks down at Scotiabank Arena. What did you think of that hit by Max Pacioretty on Jack Hughes at the end of the second period? And furthermore, the reaction or lack thereof from the Devils?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of mixed on it, to be honest. I think there's similarities between the White Cloud hit on Nyes, where they say, the head didn't snap back, so they don't look at it as the principal point of contact. So you understand that. And then on the other side, I've always been mixed on, if it's a clean hit, why does a guy have to fight after? You talk about lack of response. The Leafs did that and ended up with the extra minor penalty after the White Cloud hit. So, I mean, I'm not sure. Who was it? Dougie Hamilton was right there.
Yeah, Dougie was the first one in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Brendan Dillon's right there, guys.
That's Dillon's a monster.
Well,
that's the thing.
Brendan
Dillon,
he was chirping. But
chirping's not going to cut it.
Chirp all you want. Noodles, I was a wet noodle. I would chirp on the ice. Like, I wasn't going to fight you. Like, that's a guy... That's a guy who's, I don't know if you want to call him in the heavyweight class in the league, but he can fight the heavies. Like, that's the thing. We've seen him fight heavies, and that's like a no-brainer. Hamilton, go in there, chirp, cross-check, but get out of the way. Or Dillon, just take control of that situation, because if you're a heavy and you're not going to fight in that situation, when are you going to fight?
Yeah.
It was an opportunity to jump in. I mean, and I understand as well it's reactionary. You see your guy get drilled. You don't call a huddle and say, hey, guys, was that clean or not? Should we just stay away and put our heads down and go back to the bench? But it's, I mean, that'll be something, especially because they turn around and lose, that you're going to question maybe the team not jumping in for him, especially because it's one of your skilled players. But like I said, I've always been mixed on, if it's a clean hit, are we saying that guys have to pay a price regardless for technically doing their jobs and playing physical? I've always been back and forth on, but like I said, I mean, it's reactionary. So all you do is you see your guy get drilled. I don't think you really sit back and compute whether it was clean or not. There's usually more of a reaction than a response, and there was neither.
Yeah, there was none of it. And I'm with you in terms of, clean hits and the idea that someone has to fight, on behalf of themselves because of that. But I also know
I was going to say Hazy, too. Yep. I remember going back to the Stolarz thing and the way the game played out. I do remember the game, and it's still a Leaf record for fewest shots in a game, where they outshot 28-9 in St. Louis and won 4-0. And Curtis Joseph was easily the first star in that game. And I also remember a game very clearly where it almost happened, where the Leafs, I think, outshot the opposition 38-14 after 2 periods. And Matt Sundin had a 4-goal night, and they finally won it in overtime. 6-5 against Florida. I think
I remember that game. I remember that game.
Yeah.
I remember that vividly. Goaltending performances through the roof on that.
You know what the part that hurts the most about that night? I think I've told you guys this. Is that Joe Nieuwendyk got a hat trick and we lost. We didn't get we're sitting on the bus afterwards, and I'm staring at him. He can barely move. His back is so bad. And my heart just hurt for him because I was like, you should be celebrating. You were so amazing tonight. But Matt's got 4 on me. And I was like, God, and Matt, listen, there was a couple
of
them.
That's not a bad,
I know.
that's
but
not a
the
bad
thing
guy
is,
to give
there
it up
was,
to.
There was one that really bothered me. It was a half-wall shot. And he could bring it, but he overpowered me with it, and it still bothers me to this day because it was listen, I made lots of saves in that game. It's not the saves you make, it's the goals you allow. And I still to this day, I can remember sitting on the bus and looking to my right over, and Joe Nieuwendyk could barely sit down, and this guy had put a hat trick up, and the bus was silent because we lost 6. It was an OT goal.
You got a point. I would love you came on the bus. We got a point, boys. Good job. At least you stole a point.
But the other side of that, Noodles, is people don't remember you for that goal against. I mean, it was off the left wing boards, right, in the third period?
Yes, it was. It was a tough one.
Not that we remember that vividly.
Exactly, blocker side.
Yeah,
I have no idea where I parked, but I remember Matt Sundin's goal.
You remember that one?
Period, 20 years ago.
With Jim Ralph.
Yeah.
So you look at the way they've been playing, Ralph. You were, last week you beat Chicago just because you're the Leafs and they're Chicago. It wasn't a great game. The same thing with Nashville. Like, with all due respect to those two teams, well, I guess very disrespectfully saying they are what they are. And the Leafs just found a way to get it done, and they moved on. Then you lose to the Capitals, and Washington just outplayed you. Pittsburgh might have been a coin flip, but you lose it. Last night, Stolarz stands on his head. Now you got Anaheim, Detroit, Buffalo. Like 3 teams that are in one right now. 3 teams that you're going to be heavily favored against. What would you expect Berube's message to be based on what we've seen out of this team the last 4 or 5 games and the opportunity to rack up some points over the next few nights?
Yeah, I'd say there's got to be mild concern. And if you want to go back just a couple of games before that, Hazy, they lost in Florida, which you could say they were due. Then the game in Tampa, they give up 3 late third period goals and just hang on and get with empty netter to win there. And then all the other games, Chicago, Nashville, Washington, even the Pittsburgh game, they're all flip a coin games. We're talking about a bounce off a referee skate. We're talking about power play goals that determine it. So they've sort of been, I'd say there's a mild concern that they've been flirting with being a 500 team. And I think the concern is with the heavy schedule ahead, they've got to find it. They've got to get that traction back. And, hopefully last night you steal a game. It's a bit of a wake-up call to get back to some of the things you were doing, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Well, and health is going to be a part of that too, right? Like Jake McCabe has been day-to-day for weeks. That's been a theme with this team, and who knows when he returns and McMahon returns. He had Max back last night playing on the wing. I didn't notice him much. I think he's going to – but he's got to get going. Like, Max hasn't scored a goal yet. Like, there's guys on the – like, we know what we expect out of the top four, or the core four, and certainly the top four defense and the goalies we've been raving about. But do you look at anyone on the level below that where you think, okay, that's a guy that can really spark, the depth of this team and make it feel like that's a conversation you can put to bed if and when that guy in particular starts playing better?
Well, I know we even said it, I think, after the second period last night. We said this is a game where somebody else has got to contribute. Bottom six or defenseman scores, and it comes from the unlikely source of Holmberg, shorthanded in the third. I think that's, when you start talking about bounces and special teams and everything else, those are such valuable goals to get from your bottom six. Whether it's killing a penalty or 5-on-5 to tie a game late. So, you hope that's there. But it is amazing that, the conversation has flipped from most years where we're talking about how great the power play's been and how is Matthews going to hit 70 goals, but they've been giving up too much defensively, or the goaltending has been a little bit shaky. So it's sort of interesting that the conversation is flipped 360 from what we've had over the last 5 years.
Yeah, it really has, and we'll see what comes of it tomorrow night. Leafs Ducks right here on TSN Radio. Joe Bow and Jim Ralph with the call. Thank you, Ralphie. Enjoy it tomorrow night. We'll do it again down the road.
All right, thanks, boys.
There he is, Jim Ralph. Yeah, it's been an interesting season so far here in Toronto, and there's so much going on around the league as well. Thatcher Demko returned last night, got through the game, right? Got through the game.
That's a positive. That's almost all you're looking for there. Like, I don't know how comfortable he was going to be. He settled into the game as it went on, but even said afterwards, I felt rusty. Sure, he looked a little bit rusty. He hasn't played in 8 months, and he's coming off an injury that no one's ever seen before in hockey. But, it was it just didn't look as comfortable, but got better as the game went on.
Yeah, I think there was you watch the broadcasters even talking about the way he was moving and getting up and that. Like, my biggest thing coming off of any type of injury, regardless if you're a player, and especially as a goaltender, if you can see the person think instead of react. And what I mean, the body language. Am I worried about pushing side to side if I've got a knee issue or a hip or groins, any type of stuff? Like, to me, there looked, again, I could be wrong, there looked a little bit of like he was gingerly moving sometimes. And now he's a tremendous skater and has got great lateral movement. I think there was just rust, and it might have got into his head. Hey, how am I going to feel when the lights are on and the adrenaline's rolling? Can't wait to see him 10 games into this where, now he's back to normal. But I think they lost in OT.
They lost in OT.
Yeah, so it was a fourth. Yeah, so it was close. They got a point, but it's nice to see him back and JT Miller and on the road there getting back. So I think they're on the road to recovery at the right
That's
path.
What you're hoping for.
Exactly.
That's what you're hoping. I mean, again, the concern with Demko is like with a player. If you miss camp and you miss a couple months, maybe you don't get it back this year. You'll see pockets of it. But they're banking on it returning, and if it does, it's a game changer for them because of how good he is. All right, we've got Tim Kirkjian coming up later in the afternoon on what the Jays have done this week, what they could continue to do, what else he sees happening in the AL East. There were trades today. There's been signings in baseball. We'll update you on that. News on Scotty Barnes as well. Role play level of concern coming up in about 40 minutes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, role play level of concern coming up. And we were on the panel last night, and all of us have been in there. Studio 6 is the number of the studio, the name of the studio in which the magic happens. And it's such a cool place, and behind the scenes, they always have a ton of people coming through there and different tours. And right when you walk into the studio, and it's a massive studio, just on your right, there's a few different tables, and there's a litany of TVs up on the wall, right? I don't know how many there are, 6 or 8. It's usually a bunch of different channels and all the sports channels and all the different games, and sometimes there'll be like CP24 up there or CTV News. And we're getting prepared to interview Morgan Riley. We're getting prepared to do the Sports Center hit, trying to get in the zone. And I look over, and I just see Al's brother's face on like 3 of the TVs. Because OverDrive was on yesterday. Frankie, you were in there. Yeah. And obviously one of the TVs was on TSN 4. And there's Al's brother, and I know what he's doing. He's giving out his clue. And I'm like, this must be amazing for when they bring people through on tours. Like, especially big wigs or whatever, big investors. You're like, come through here. There's our TV wall where we watch everything, including Al's brother give out a clue with a blurred background. Like, how do you even explain what the hell's going on here at TSN?
That's talent. He is
pure
part
talent.
of the talent pool at TSN.
He absolutely is. He is a superstar, and he's my partner. And we've sent Al's brother out somewhere in the city with a pair of Leaf tickets. And you have to guess where he's hiding for your chance to win them. Are you guys ready for the third clue of the week?
Yes.
Hey, OverDrive fans, it's Wednesday, and I've got another clue to get you one step closer to finding out where is Al's brother. Giving away Leafs tickets for December 21st against the New York Islanders. And here is your Wednesday clue. I'm standing next to an iconic Christmas tree said to be the tallest in North America.
Okay, come on, Al's brother. We know where you are now. Tune in tomorrow for another clue. Not that it's necessary. And the first caller through on Friday with the correct location will win a pair of tickets to see the Leafs take on the Islanders December 21st. Find Al's brother is brought to you by McAlpine Ford in Aurora. Our family, the Ford family, and you. Full details at tsn1050.ca. All right, hour 2 coming up. Scott Hartnell will join us. Role play level of concern. Bill Belichick, I believe, is employed again. I think he's coaching football again. We've got to touch on that. Scotty Barnes update, a LeBron James rumor and report. We'll touch on that, where Bronny comes into play. Hour 2 up next. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4.